Ladies and gentlemen, we interrupt your regularly scheduled programming to bring you this special bulletin. It's been a good 8 months since the release of the complete and total absolute failure that was Dragon Age the Veilguard, and yet still getting articles and discussions and coping and seething and gaslighting and redirecting or all kinds of other nonsense coming out about this game. And the oh so latest is none other than the how do I put this? Full of something. Full of integrity, I would personally say lack thereof. So-called reporter Jason Schreier, who mocked gamers about Dragon Age the Veilguard, now calls it a debacle. Finally, completely and totally acknowledging it as a failure. However, as usual, just like Paul Tassi, Jason Schreier wants to blame absolutely everything else except for the ideological nonsense that was pushed in the game. Whether it was the marketing, the character creator, the oh so wonderful dialogue, or the perfect, wonderful, spectacular character that was Tosh. No, it's not that. It's the gamers, it's the chuds, it's the YouTubers coming online. At least that's who Paul Tassi wants to blame as well. It has nothing to do with the writing, the storytelling. I believe I saw one article that said the game failed because of the massive pivot from a live service game into a single player game. Because yes, of course, ladies and gentlemen, that is something that would have saved it, right? That would have made it a success. But we're over here at that Park Place. Marvin Montanaro. I'm going to get your name right, Marvin. I'm going to go with Marvin. Thank you. On Halloween 2024, Dragon Age the Veilguard, and I'm going to call it that from now on, launched to a quick flash of attention on Steam for a few hours. BioWare's long-delayed fantasy RPG topped sales chart. And, of course, Jason Schreier came out. That was his time to shine, ladies and gentlemen. Go woke, top the charts, the sales charts, because it was the best thing selling that day, right? Well, unfortunately, didn't go so well in the long term. Got to have legs, got to have some longevity there. You can have a big old sales day and then fall off a cliff, which is exactly what the Veilguard did. The jab was aimed squarely at players who had raised red flags, quite a few. I did some myself, because the marketing for the game was all about my diversity, my inclusion, my top surgery scars, my vitiligo, my pronouns, my this, that, the other. That's all they advertised. Didn't talk about the story, the gameplay, the mechanics, anything like that. All ideological discussion. That, for me, is a massive red flag. You're focusing on the wrong thing. But I digress. Red flags about the game's direction. Players who were ridiculed for daring to question whether a beloved franchise had abandoned its roots in favor of trend-chasing aesthetics and cultural posturing. Just a month later, Veilguard had become one of the most disastrous releases. I couldn't even finish playing it. I put 24 hours into it and I couldn't. The dialogue just drove me away. Releases in modern gaming history. EA quietly pushed the game into steep discounts and ended up being free on PlayStation Plus. The player base collapsed. Layoffs hit BioWare. The game's director resigned. Oh no, if it was such a massive top of the charts there, old Jason. Guess you wanted to wait till the right opportunity to release your little report. Kind of like you did with Blizzard, huh? Had to wait till you write a book. Anyway, games director resigned, and now, in an extraordinary about-face, Jason Schreier, the most disingenuous so-called journalist I've ever seen. I don't care what he gets right. He's a vile, putrid piece of garbage. And yes, I do mean that. I said it. I mean it. After the debacle that was his information of the goings-on at Blizzard Activision, or Activision Blizzard, waiting to write that book. Inside information of rather nefarious things going on. But hey, we got to wait until I can profit on for the most. Extraordinary about face. Jason Schreier has published a lengthy article calling the game a debacle. Something we all knew, let's see, 8 months, we all knew 8 months ago, or 9 months. Nearly 3,000 words of post-mortem analysis. There's one thing Jason Schreier never mentions: the exact criticism he once mocked, the overwhelming fan backlash to the game's identity-driven presentation, tone, and marketing. Because heaven forbid, when you actually acknowledge the main problem that people had with the game, modern day, current day, Western terms and actions in a fantasy, a high fantasy game like Dragon Age, they have no place in that, but you want to push it and push it and push it. Fans left a bad taste in their mouth. They walked away. They watched other people. They watched YouTubers, content creators play the game, heard it, saw it for themselves, and said, nah, I'm going to keep my money right in my wallet. But we don't want to acknowledge that. Absolutely not. Because, all the stuff that Jason Schreier mentions in his little article, that's why the writing was terrible. It had nothing to do with the actual writers, right? It was the crunch. It was the change in leadership. It was the pivot from live service to single player game. It was all that. Nothing to do with the writing, of course. Masterclass in avoidance, because they can't address that the chuds were right. The opinions of the masses not wanting to touch a game like this with a 10-foot barge pole. Nope, can't be that. Has to be everything else but that. How do you go from blaming the fans to blaming the development hell from one breath to another? I do find that curious. But we don't touch the identity-driven presentation, tone, and marketing. Heaven forbid we mention that. It throws up red flags, as channels like mine, among many others, talking about it, showing it off, giving our opinions to those who so kindly decide to watch our videos. Thank you very much. Hit that like and subscribe and do all that nifty little stuff. Appreciate you making it this far. It leaves a bad taste in people's mouth. And then, as I've said many times before, red flags go up, fans wait, prospective customers wait, hold on to their wallets, and they view someone else playing the finished product, and they realize, oh, I'll walk away from this game and wait for something else. Schreier's article inside Dragon Age debacle that gutted EA's BioWare studio is thorough in many respects. He documents the tortured development process, welcome to a job, from live service pivots to management infighting to budgetary strain, which I do not believe has anything to do with the writing quality. There's no doubt that BioWare faced immense pressure from EA to produce a commercial hit. Everybody wants to produce a commercial hit, but they seem to think that dumping all kinds of money into it, much like Hollywood, the more money you put into it, the more money you're going to get back from it, right? Because obviously, if you dump money in, the quality will quality will be equal. The more money you put in, the higher the quality will be, right? That makes sense, doesn't it? What's most striking is what the article left out. Not once does Schreier acknowledge the widespread and immediate backlash from the longtime fans who felt the game's tone and character design had abandoned the mature fantasy roots of the series, not to mention the insertion of modern-day, real-world ideological dialogue. But what do I know? First trailer for Veilguard was lambasted across social media for its Fortnite-like aesthetic. Over-the-top, quippy dialogue, it just got worse and worse as you played the game, and an ensemble of characters that many felt looked like a diversity initiative rather than a cast grounded in the world's lore. And another thing that turned people away is the more they watched others play it, checking their opinions, it seemed that the choices you made throughout the game really didn't have that much of an effect on major parts of the game. I could be wrong. I know one choice that I got to, you had to choose between one city or another, but it didn't seem to affect, like, I went down to protect one city, and the other city was destroyed. But the character of the city that was destroyed didn't hate me so much. You would think they would have more animosity towards me, but it didn't feel that way. Let's keep going. Even internal testers reportedly flagged the snarky tone as a concern, but of course, corporate doesn't listen because they know better than everyone else. They know better than the customers. You think you want it, but you don't. Where have we heard that before? BioWare leadership scrambled late in the development to rewrite portions of the script and avoid comparisons to notable flop Forspoken. Lovely dialogue there. But by then the damage was done. The tonal inconsistency became yet another issue on top of already fractured gameplay and storytelling. For me, it was the gameplay and storytelling. 100% top to bottom. And I don't see... I'm repeating myself. Schreier mentions the dialogue rewrite. Well, how bad was the dialogue before if they went in and rewrote it? But never connects it to the cultural criticism that had engulfed the game's reception. Because of course not. Again, if Jason Schreier acknowledges the chuds, he has to admit he was wrong. Same thing with people like Paul Tassi. They have to admit they were wrong. They're going to go out there and claim that, quote unquote, woke is not the one thing that destroys a game. And I don't think anybody's going to argue with that, Paul. But you have to acknowledge it. And by woke, I mean ideological checkboxes. For me personally, it's ideological checkboxes that you focus on instead of gameplay and story. And that's exactly what happened with Dragon Age Veilguard. Gamers were right. Media mocked them anyway. We know we're right. Customer is always right in matter of taste. Been said over and over again, but we only hear half of the quote. But you always have to remember, when it comes to a matter of taste, the other saying we like to say is the market will decide. When you put something out there, and the vast majority of said market, of potential customers, don't care for it, don't want it, don't need it in their escapism, in their power fantasies, they will respond in kind by closing their wallets nice and tight when they don't like the dialogue, when they don't like the look of the characters. Whether you like it or not, you can call people gooners and whatever you want to. You can call them racists and bigots and all manner of names over and over again. You can mock the customer left, right, and center, and it will never matter because you're mocking and making fun of the people with the money, with the buying power. They will simply go somewhere else, close their wallets, go somewhere else, and spend their money on what they want. Your game will fail, your insults will mean nothing, and we will move on to the next thing. You have such small, simple little games like Schedule 1 blowing up in popularity. You have beautiful games made by a small team in Expedition 33, one after another, of people, developers putting passion and love and care into their game, and maybe, just maybe, not insulting the potential customers, listening to the criticism instead of mocking it, trying to claim what the players need instead of listening to what they want and what they don't like. When Veilguard was revealed, players spoke up. Quite a few players spoke up too. A lot of videos were made on it. They said this wasn't Dragon Age. They said the trailer looked like a parody. They pointed out that the dark, complex world BioWare had once built now felt like it had been scrubbed down for modern sensibilities or the modern audience. And they were right. They pointed to the ability to add top surgery scars in the character creator, which I really couldn't give a toss about. But the main problem I had is you took away options. You want to give scars to those who want to remove breastises, but you didn't give people the ability to add larger breasts and buttocks. That comparison was made across the internet, one video after another. If you sit there, you can add, for me personally, add whatever options you want, but don't take them away, or don't make the player feel like you're taking them away, because they will respond in kind. Again, the player knows what they want. They know what they don't want. They're quite vocal about what they don't like. You should probably listen more often. Maybe cater to your target demographic. Pointed ability to add the top surgery scars in the character creator and the game's seeming obsession with gender politics. Boy, oh boy, massive red flags. That's an understatement. Proved that this long-awaited title had gone off the rails and embraced the myth of the modern audience. As I said earlier, as I said in video after video, you focused on the modern audience. You focused on a make-believe modern audience, trying to sell to a demographic that A, doesn't exist, and the few at least does not exist to a quantifiable number that will turn a profit for you. Mix in your, what some would call propaganda, but make the game fun first. Don't take away the slider options for the breasts and the booties. Men and women like that. They don't have a problem with some of the ridiculous proportions that some games are able to make, but larger proportions than what Dragon Age the Veilguard offered would have been nice. And you may not have heard too many people screeching about the top surgery scars. Who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. The nail in the coffin for me was the dialogue. 100% the dialogue. I could have dealt with the almost boring press this one button over and over and over and over and over again to finish combat. So I tap on my mouse pad like you can see me. That is what did it for me. I could have dealt with the combat. I could have dealt with the almost, well, I guess probably 95% linear story. Very little branching, very little exploring. The exploring that was there was good, but it was the dialogue, much like the Saints Row reboot. Dialogue drove me away from the game. I couldn't stand it. Absolutely insufferable and made absolutely no sense in a high fantasy world, which tells me, gone off the rails and embraced the myth of the modern audience, you focused too much on checking that box. You focused too much on sending a message, being preachy, trying to put your own personal ideals into the game. It showed in the writing, it showed in the gameplay, and people walked away. And yet, the mainstream or the so-called mainstream media journalists will never admit it. Why anyone still listens to Jason Schreier? What he got right? Couldn't care less. After all the nonsense, the insults, the holding on to a story in order to sell a book, left too much of a bad taste in my mouth. So, why anyone still listens to him, I don't know. But what can you expect from the so-called mainstream media deflecting, diverting, gaslighting, instead of actually, honestly, legitimately being able to read the room, listen to what the so-called gooners are saying, listen to the critics, listen to the criticism, and maybe, just maybe, acknowledging the problem that potential customers have with these games. And maybe, just maybe, your so-called mainstream journalists can get through the skulls of these devs. Maybe they'll start listening instead of constantly having to rely on, well, Korean studios, Japanese studios, Chinese studios to give us a fun, attractive video game to look at and play. I have to wait and see how that handles. See where that goes. Who knows? What do I know? Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Leave a like, leave a dislike, do all the things you do, and I hope to see you on the next one. Bye-bye.